its 5th national championship.
Giving you an inside look at everything going on in Husker Nation. This is the KLIN Husker Hour.
Kicks and deals the 2-2 pitch. Swing and a miss. Strike 3. Jackson Brockett has the first 9-inning no-hitter for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. 1954, and he did it on his 12th strikeout.
Dunset got it! Underdog and then one! Exclamation point! Pump the brakes!
Now your hosts, KLIN contributor Cole Stukenholtz and sports director Nate Rohr.
Good Saturday morning. Welcome to another edition of the KLIN Husker Hour, off and running on the last day of May. And it may be the last day for one of the Nebraska spring programs. We already know the other prominent ball bat sport saw their season come to an end, and we will break down both of their situations as they stand currently, with Husker Baseball still alive, but staring at the losers bracket, which is always a tough road to hoe in a regional. But happy to have Nate Rohr alongside after we've been you've been everywhere. We were out. I was out. We didn't have a show last week, and here we are again to come together. And happy to have you, and happy to talk about a lot that's been going on.
Happy to be here. I wish I was coming to you from a hotel room in Oklahoma City, but unfortunately that's not the case today. But here we are, and we'll chat some Husker sports. And happy to be here, and let's go.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have seen what was quite the ride that you and a lot of Husker softball fans and some, newer to the sport, certainly, as would be evidenced kind of by the attention and the crowd sizes and all that. But it was pretty incredible to see this team just continue to improve and get better, and to be led by one of the superstars in the sport, one that did win a National Player of the Year award in Jordy Ball. Her exploits this season are legendary, and I'm excited about next season, but that doesn't take anything away from what they did here in her junior year in the 2025 season. What a ride, and they did just come up short in that super regional against a really, really good pitcher in Tennessee and a really good team in Tennessee as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, unfortunately, this team took a little while to come together. You had the Jordy Ball injury. You had a bunch of transfers coming in on the infield. You had a bunch of transfers coming in, period. You had Kylie McGee working her way back from an injury. You had Hannah Kamenson really trying to get her legs back under her as a pitcher. And so this was a team that took a little longer to bake. And that cost them in February in those non-conference games that might have made the difference in terms of seeding, in terms of putting them in a place to host a regional, to host a super regional. And so this team kind of, I'm not going to say they put themselves behind the 8 ball, but they started out a little slower than you might have liked for a team trying to get to Oklahoma City. They came together very well in the Big Ten season. And what really is exciting is that they can put all the experience that they had, and they return basically all of it. You lose Ava Bredwell, who is a really important part of this team. I mean, the fact that they could sit there 50 times a year and pencil in their catcher, and it'd be somebody who is pretty effective with the bat as well. That's important. And Abby Squire, who finished the year strong, she was still working her way back from some injuries, but Squire out in left field. I mean, those are two important character pieces, but they're also two pieces whose production you can replace. And so you're hopeful that whether it's the transfer portal, whether it's internally in the program, somebody like Natalia Hill stepping up in the outfield and starting to hit, but you feel like you can replace the production you lost. You feel like you can, you'll get more out of certain pieces. I mean, especially Hannah Cammons and Kylie McGee, the two pitchers, the two secondary pitchers. And then, you just hope to add as you're able. And this team should be very well positioned to make the run to Oklahoma City that I think everybody is going to walk into next season expecting them to make. And maybe that's the biggest challenge of all, is that this team is going to walk into next year with really high expectations. I think there were high expectations coming into this year, make no mistake. But, it was also sort of a wait and see approach to see how healthy Jordy Ball would be, how the infield would mesh together, things like that. There's going to be no waiting next year. I think this is a team that's going to have high expectations, the first weekend in February, and be held to account on those expectations. So how they deal with that might be the biggest story of next year.
Yeah. And lest we forget, Nate, I mean, Jordy Ball did all of this. And if you're on the YouTube stream, you can see all of her statistics, a couple of school records mixed in there, and certainly one of the best two-way players the sport's ever seen. Nate, she was coming off of a torn ACL.
Yep.
And so there was times early in the season where I remember talking to you about, hey, how close to 100% is she, or is she fully trusting that knee yet, or all those things that you see and hear from athletes who are coming back from serious injuries like that. And so knowing that and how well she performed even after that recovery, I can't wait to see what she does in her senior year, because she's not going to have that recovery to come back. She's only going to be looking to get stronger and more improved and looking to integrate those skills with whatever this next year's roster looks like.
Yeah, and that's an important thing that you point out there, that, she at this time last year, she was still rehabbing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was going well. She was on the right path, everything like that. But she was still working her way back, and she was still trying to build up her stamina and figure out how much she could do. We know how much she can do now. And so it's a matter of sharpening. It's a matter of slightly improving, the inches that this team needed. The difference between keeping Dodge in the ballpark on Sunday and that ball leaving the ballpark. So she can really refine herself and be the absolute best pitcher she can be, the best player she can be. And who she was this year was really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah, she really was. And it's, the one national award goes the way of the Arkansas Star. The other one goes Jordy's way. Those are, somewhat subjective, but by any measure, I mean, to have a top 3 player nationally is pretty good place to start.
Yep.
And you also look at the job that Rhonda Revelle did here to put this thing together. We just saw a longtime legend at another women's sport here at Nebraska ride off into the sunset with a legendary player like Lexi Rodriguez as she finished her career. Might we see the same for Revelle with Jordy Ball? Maybe next year is her last rodeo. What do you think?
I'm not sure of that. She has more energy, more enjoyment of coaching than she's had before. Or at least as much. I don't know. I've not gotten any sense from her as to whether or not there's a timeline here. My understanding is that her contract is up after next year.
Mm-hmm.
So from that standpoint, does she get an extension this summer, which I assume if she'd want, she'd get. But from the outside, yeah, it would make a lot of sense for her to go, okay, I coached Jordy Ball, and this program's in a good place, and there's a lot of interest and a lot of intrigue around it, and this would be a good point to hang him up. I don't know if Rhonda Revelle is thinking that way, though.
Yeah. Little bit more here on softball, and then we'll get into baseball. Evan Bland from the Omaha World Herald is going to join us to talk a little bit of Chapel Hill regional action as Nebraska baseball fell last night 7-4 We've also got some college football playoff stuff, some Nebraska football scheduling news, plenty to get to. But let's talk a little bit about what happened on the diamond last weekend when Nebraska tried to get by Tennessee. Because we didn't have a show last week because of Nebraska baseball having that Big Ten tournament reschedule. So Nebraska wins game 1 and comes up just short, lose by a run in games 2 and 3. Hey, Jordy Ball allows only 6 runs in 3 games, and it still wasn't enough. The Tennessee pitcher, I can't think of her name. Carlin Pickens, yep.
She lives in my nightmares.
And she's throwing very, very hard in them, I'm sure. I mean, look, she is one of the best pitchers in the game, right up there with Kennedy and Ball and some of the other stars of softball. It was really, really good to match those two up for the good of the sport. The ESPN sent their top broadcast team there. They did I think it was the 4th highest rated super regional on ESPN in broadcast history. It was really good for that, but not as good for Nebraska if you're trying to get by a really good pitcher when you have a really good pitcher of your own. But what a matchup, and just Nebraska was right there. They were right there, and I think it does give you hope for what they could do next year. But they proved they were the real deal this year, the way they battled that Tennessee team.
Yeah. Anybody who's sitting there thinking, oh, they fluked their way through the regional, and what would have happened if they would have faced LSU.
Yeah.
I mean, Nebraska comes out, they win that game 1. Yes, they got a break with that drop fly ball in left field that scored them a couple of runs, but it was a 5-2 game. I mean, they kind of cruised on Friday night. And, in the game, in the end, softball historically has been a pitching dominated game. And while we've moderated a little bit in college softball from a sport totally dominated by pitching to one where offense has a bigger place. Whether it's baseball or softball, very often, if the person pitching the rock for the other team throws it as hard as anybody in the country, it's really tough to hit. And Nebraska had difficulty with it. The one caveat on that is, you're not going to see a pitcher like Carlin Pickens basically all year, except if you see her in February like Nebraska did.
Yeah.
You wonder if it would have helped this team to see an elite pitcher somewhere along the line in the Big Ten schedule. And really, they didn't. They didn't play UCLA. They didn't play Oregon. They didn't play even Michigan with Durkowski. The team as a whole wasn't as good, but Durkowski's a pretty elite level player, elite level pitcher. And so maybe that might have helped this Nebraska team a little bit. But in the end, Carlin Pickens is a top-notch pitcher. She's a terrific pitcher. They were able to get her some runs, especially early, and put the pressure on Nebraska. I think that was really important. And then they were able to just get enough for her. I mean, 2 one-run losses in the Big Ten tournament or in the Super Regional. Tennessee has been on this stage a lot. Nebraska has not. It had been over a decade, so nobody on this roster other than Jordy Ball had played in a Super Regional. Wow. And to play in that atmosphere, place was full, it was amped against that pitcher. It's a pretty big ask, and especially to be successful in it your first time. It was an awfully big stage for this program, and I hope they learned from it. I'm sure they did. But it just came down to their pitcher was elite and at the top of her game and just a little bit better than Nebraska.
Yeah. It was a fun ride for Husker softball. They finish up just a step short of the Women's College World Series, and looking forward to what they could do in the 2026 season for sure. You can join us on the YouTube stream. We're on the KLIN socials, the YouTube page, as well as the Twitter and Facebook pages for KLIN, and the Husker Hour Facebook page as well. We've got about 15 to 20 of our closest friends popping in there right now. You can hit us up on the comments section in there if you've got a question or a comment about Husker softball or Husker baseball. We've got that coming up very soon with Evan Bland. Nate and I will break down what happened yesterday, as well as what to take away from a season like this, where it was a struggle. There were injuries, but ultimately they get the job done in Omaha, thanks to a Michigan State right fielder and a lot of grit that they showed as well. So we'll talk Husker baseball and plenty more as we continue on here this Saturday morning on the KLIN Husker Hour.
Tune in.
You a complete review of the Huskers news this week. This is the KLIN Husker Hour on Lincoln's Husker Radio, 1499.3 KLIN.
Well, did they get a break? Yes. But had they taken advantage of that break all the way to the regionals? Absolutely they have. You think back to plays like the Arkansas baseball triangle that doesn't catch the foul ball against Oregon State in the College World Series, 5-6 years ago. And Oregon State took advantage of it. They win that game, and they go on to win the title. Dave Roberts for the Red Sox, he gets the stolen base, and they come back from a 3-0 deficit. The Cardinals in 2011, they hit it late. They hit a late far drive, and Nelson Cruz can't catch it against the wall. And the Cardinals tie it, and they ended up winning in the 6th or in the 11th, and they win Game 7. You have to take advantage of those gifts that you're given, and Nebraska baseball did that. We've not been on the air together since that Tuesday game where the Michigan State right fielder drops the ball and gives Nebraska new life, and they win in the 10th and go on the run to get them into the regionals. But you have to obviously acknowledge that happened, but also the fact that, again, Will Bolt's squad knows how to win games at Charles Schwab Field, Omaha, Nate.
Yeah, and you had to win 3 more games to take full advantage of that break. I mean, that game, that drop fly ball only won you a chance to have relevance on Friday night, which eventually turned into Saturday morning.
Yep.
So I mean, hey, it's a little break, but you got a little break. And you think of how this team has kind of been behind the 8 ball all year. The Mason McConaughey injury that knocked him out 3 weeks into the season. And then the Tucker Timmerman injury that kept him out, for 2 months of the year. This team was due some good luck. They were due something to go their way that maybe they didn't quite deserve, that maybe they just were lucky to get. And these things happen in baseball, like you mentioned. I mean, great runs very often are fueled by something like this. And then to this team's credit, look, they played the Big Ten regular season champion and beat them. And then they turn around later that night and they beat Penn State. And then they beat UCLA. They did what they needed to do. They got an early lead on them. I don't know how interested UCLA was in that game. I don't think they had much urgency. They certainly didn't need to because they were into regionals. That was a game, frankly, Nebraska needed more than UCLA. And the Huskers played like it and seized control of that game and were able to win. So it's to their credit that they were able to take advantage of a situation that fell in their favor. But that's what you got to do. I mean, how many times do we see it go the other way, where the ball's just laying there on the field and you don't pick it up, or there's an interception to be gotten and it goes through your hands?
Yeah,
we've seen that from Husker athletics. So to these guys' credit, they took advantage of a gift, and to make it to regionals with as bumpy as this year has been, is a real credit to this team and what they've been able to do this year, and the grit they've shown, and they've hung in there. I mean, look, it was a tough start to this year. Mentioned the injuries. I think they scheduled in a way where they hoped to host a regional, and when Nebraska softball saw this last year, when you schedule in a way because you expect to have a player and you don't have that player, it gets real tough real fast. And some decisions have to be made in that locker room. Are we just going to wear this? Are we going to get buried in the avalanche, or are we going to keep fighting, keep digging? Maybe it doesn't show dividends this week, but once you get through that West Coast trip, the schedule eased up, and this team took full advantage of that too. So, it speaks to their grit. It speaks to their toughness that they were able to overcome some pretty big boulders to get into regionals and to just give themselves a chance.
Yeah, I want to get into the coaching aspect of it in a minute, but first, the way they operated in the Big Ten tournament. A lot of folks have pointed this out on the week of radio that I've listened to over the last week. But Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament essentially faced a field that was, probably more difficult than a regional, having to go through two regional hosts in UCLA and Oregon, and not being able to lose a single game,
right,
to be able to escape. They had to win all four. There was no coming back from a loss early on like there was last season in the earlier format. So to have done it that way, and to know that there was no margin for error and still get it done, and even to take more injury hits as they went. You lose Joshua Overbeek against Oregon. You lose Robbie Bolin early in that championship game against UCLA. Overbeek did not play yesterday. Bolin did pinch hit. Max Butenbach, fortunately, is healthy enough, and he had the one big swing Nebraska had come through yesterday. But you have that stuff pop up, and they still got the job done. And the loss last night notwithstanding, they were able to put together series win after series win after series win to get themselves into the position to where they could make that Big Ten tournament, which was still in doubt for a little while because they had that tough front end of the schedule. But the team had enough, and you had enough guys emerge like freshman Devin Nunez, like Tucker Timmerman when he came back from the injury, and you got contributions from some unexpected places.
No doubt about it, and you needed guys to step up, and they were able to get those guys to step up. I mean, even Drew Christo, who's had kind of a up and down career here at Nebraska, how important was he in the Big Ten tournament run? Yeah. So they were able to keep everybody engaged. They were able to keep everybody fighting and rowing on this deal, and they were finally able to get going in the direction that they needed to come out and capture a bid to regionals. And so that's a credit to the culture that Will Bolts and his staff has built in that locker room. And that's one thing, say what you will about where this team has performed the last few years. I think there's maybe some outsized expectations that surround Nebraska baseball because of what happened here in the early 2000s. And the weakness of the Big Ten Conference in the sport. But there is a very strong culture in Will Bolt's locker room to keep fighting, to keep hacking away, to not let circumstances get the better of you. And that's no small thing. Now, hey, we all hope they perform a little better, but when they get their backs against the wall, they're pretty tough. And that's an important piece for a program that's trying to win, and can be a real thing to build on. And you hope they're able to do that in the next few years.
Yeah, another couple of handful of guys that really did play very, very well and gave Nebraska a chance. It was the best week of the season for Hogan Aligso,
Yep.
Both at the plate and catching a really, really good game from all of his pitching. And then Luke Broderick, his two performances, the longest outings of his season, kept Nebraska in that Michigan State game. And then also he was integral against Penn State as well. So really contributions up and down. And that's what it takes to win a tournament style weekend like that. And that's what it'll take to get out of the weekend this weekend. And the job of what Will Bold and Rob Childress and all the other guys on the staff have done. I'll have to ask Evan if this was his stat. I forget where I heard it and I forget what the stat was, but the percentage of wins in Will Bold's tenure that have come in the month of May is really staggering, because this team doesn't come out of the gates very strong, right? Sometimes they're not sure who they are. Sometimes they have injuries like they did this year. They typically do play a pretty tough schedule. But one thing's for sure, except for that 2022 season, they finish very, very well. 21, you obviously have the regional at Arkansas, the number 1 overall seed. You dang near beat them. Yeah. And then 23, you win the regular season title. 24 and 25, you won the tournament. So you do have to give a lot of credit to whatever he's doing, because it is working at the very time you want to be peaking. He's figured that part of it out, and that's worth its weight in gold in any sport.
No doubt about it. I mean, and we see it with the other teams as well, that, how important it is to be at your best by the end of the season. And I would also point out that being a Northern team in baseball, you've got some real hurdles to be at your best in February and early March. I mean, you don't know how much you're able to practice outside and see ball flight off your bat, and deal with lighting and defensive communication. And so I really, I know people don't love seeing them go out and have a rough weekend against good competition, but that's part of the deal of being a Northern team. It's really tough to be a top-notch Northern team right out of the gate, right on, February the 14th, because you just don't get the same practice situation and practice opportunities that a lot of these Southern teams do. And, where baseball's margins are pretty small. This is not a sport where the best team wins every single game. This isn't volleyball. This isn't football. It can make the difference between you being able to beat a good but maybe not great Southern team or not. And so, I always caution people when they look at those results in February and March to adjust them a little bit and to understand that it's really difficult to be good at the ball bat sports right out of the gate.
Yeah. And hey, they did, even though they struggled early, they got to win over number 1 overall seed Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
They were right there with LSU, who's hosting as well. And they did compile a pretty good resume when it was all said and done, when you add in the Oregon UCLA wins right there at the end of the season too. All right. When we come back, we'll keep this baseball conversation going. Evan Bland from Omaha World Herald covered this team very closely all season, and has for quite a few years very well. We're getting Evan on right after this, plus my thoughts on the college football playoff, what the commissioner of the SEC is trying to do. I've got thoughts on that. Continue on. Yeah. More to come here on the KLIN Husker Hour. Stay with us.
At Snyder Shooting
Husker football, basketball, baseball, and beyond. This is the KLIN Husker Hour on 1499.3 KLIN.
Well, as we continue talking baseball, one thing that we would never do to our next guest, even if he was injured, we would not wait 5 minutes for him to get back here before we continued play. We would just power through. It's Evan Bland from the Omaha World Herald back again on Husker Hour. Evan, good morning.
Morning, guys. Yeah, I'm not getting my shoulder popped back in this morning for some base running duty. So no, I appreciate that. I'd probably just I'd sit the rest of that game out.
We have Wilson Moore warming up. Just get him in the game. Let's go. Come on. We talked a little bit this morning already about Husker baseball and the job that Will Bolton, Rob Childress, and staff and all the players have done to get to this point. Assuming that the road ends this weekend, whether it's to Holy Cross today or Oklahoma or North Carolina tomorrow, how will this season be remembered by Husker fans?
You know, I kind of feel like it came full circle in a lot of ways. Like you think about where this team was going into the season, preseason, top 25, it had a veteran lineup. I think the expectation was they were going to contend in the Big Ten and that they were going to play in the NCAA tournament. And ultimately, that's what happened. They win the Big Ten tournament title. They make it to regional weekend. How that happened is not what anybody expected. You didn't expect to lose your ace, your preseason All-American early on, and your top bullpen arm and Tucker Timmerman. You didn't expect to go through probably 2 or 3 different offensive identities based on effectiveness and other injuries. And I don't think you probably anticipated the schedule being as difficult logistically and in terms of the caliber of opponent as it ended up being. So, you know, it's amazing, like the margin for error. Like if Michigan State's right fielder catches a fly ball out a week ago, Nebraska essentially finishes the season 500. And I think people are probably dissatisfied with how that played out. And as it turns out, they go 6-2 against ranked opponents. They do play into regional weekends. So I think you got to say it was a successful season in that regard. I think you got to give them credit for fighting through adversity and through a rough start. But I also think it's fair to look at this season and say, yeah, I mean, there's still another level here, especially when you get into the postseason that this team can reach. So I think it's one where you probably hit the markers ultimately. And now you maybe want more of a solid regular season resume moving forward so you can have a better standing in that NCAA tournament.
You mentioned the 6-2 mark against ranked opponents. So that's kind of the top of what you can do. But there were plenty of losses throughout the season, whether it's the midweek stuff to Creighton or just beyond that are on the other end. That you know, you figure the ranked wins are a +2 almost. They're beyond what you would expect. But you also gave them back with losses throughout the regular season that you weren't expecting to have. So how do you bring the floor up, I guess, is the short way of answering this question or asking the question.
Yeah. I think it's the midweek stuff, especially like it requires different traits to be true about your team. I think one, you need to have a little bit more depth of pitching, and Nebraska for a while thought this year might be the year where they finally have kind of that set midweek guy, someone who can give you 5 or 6 and turn it over to the bullpen. They tried that with Carson Yassa and TJ Coates, and ultimately their best midweek success came when they made it a bullpen game, sort of like Creighton likes to do, where you got 7, 8, 9 pitchers out there. That became their identity this year. I think the other part, especially with those midweekers, is sometimes the pitching, you're not going to use your best guys, and you need to just outslug the opponent. You need to win a game 12-9 or something like that. And that's been something this team has struggled to do. So I think the midweek, it's kind of where you start. But I think overall it's pitching depth. And, you know, again, Nebraska had to cover 80, 90, 100 innings that they didn't anticipate needing to when Mason McConaughey went out. And I mean, just look at the last half of this season where they win, I think it's 7 of the last 8 regular season weekends. you did that a lot of the time after losing Friday and coming back and piecing it together. Imagine how different that could have been if you would have had a McConaughey on a Friday night against Northwestern or on a Friday against Minnesota, and you were able to not just be stronger in that game, but push some of those other arms back a day onto Saturday or Sunday. So it's hard to be too harsh on Nebraska in that regard, because it did look like they had it set up to cover a lot of those innings in a quality fashion on the weekend, and it just didn't happen that way. They developed some guys, and I think in the future they're going to be better for putting some of these younger arms out there in high leverage spots. But that to me is going to be, I mean, the offseason is going to be, can you continue to bring in quality arms? And then can you add maybe a bat or two out of the portal? I think that's the other piece, is Nebraska has been limited by its lack of power really outside of 2023 with Bryce Matthews and Max Anderson and Gabe Swanson that year. It's been a team it's just been kind of a grind sometimes to generate offense. And so can you find an impact bat or two that can give you a different dimension offensively? I think those are all off-season to-dos.
Evan Bland from the Omaha World Herald joining us here on the KLIN Husker Hour. Evan, I don't know if this was your stat that I heard earlier this week, so if it was, feel free to take full credit. But somebody, when I listened to radio this week, was talking about Will Bolt's record at Nebraska and the amount of wins that he has in the month of May. It was a pretty large percentage, considering you play games in March, April, and May, and the way that they've been able to hit their peak at the right time late in the season. That's kind of become his calling card at this point, is making sure that he has these guys kind of going in the right direction when it gets down to postseason time. The job that they've done to get the team here, pretty well documented this year, but this is a trend now. You have them peaking in 21 into the regional against Arkansas. They win the Big Ten in 23 in the regular season and the tournament the last couple of years. It's encouraging to see that is something that this team has a pretty set culture of, that they are trending in the right direction at the very right time where you want them to be.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of almost a necessity for a colder weather school to take that path. So, I think there are kind of a couple of reasons for it. One, obviously it's hard to hit the ground running in mid-February the way that you could if you're a Southern team that can practice year-round outdoors, but also is able to host a lot of home games that first month of the year. That's not a luxury Nebraska and a lot of schools like that have. So, in Nebraska's history, certainly under Bolt and even previously, like the numbers show, like once you get home to Haymarket and you're able to start playing some games in the friendly confines, like you're able to take off a little bit. I think it's a reflection in part of the schedule that Nebraska has put up there, especially the last couple of years, where they've really tried to be intentional about how they craft their RPI and challenging themselves early on. So you get to the point where by the time you're playing a Big Ten schedule, the second half of the year, it almost feels a little bit easier than what it was to start. And then I think the other thing too is sometimes it just takes a while to figure out roles, especially in college baseball, where you might have a sense of who you can trust, say, on the mound. But by the time you get midway through the year, that could look a whole lot different. And that was the case, I think, for some players for Nebraska this year. And you get better as the year goes on. I think there are a number of guys in the lineup that you can point to and say they got better as the season went on. So I think it's kind of a mix of all those things. And by the time you get to this point in the year, you should have a pretty good sense of what you want to be about, who you trust, kind of the blueprint that you have for winning games. And it was almost too late for Nebraska this year. It would have been if they hadn't run the table in Omaha the way that they did. But I think it's just kind of the way it's going to have to be. Like, you're just not going to be able to start 15-2 in February as a Northern school every year. It's just not realistic. So if you can improve and get better toward the end, I think that's probably your best path to consistent success.
Not to put a bow on this season just yet, but let's be real. Nebraska's in the losers bracket of regional, and they would have to win 4 straight elimination bracket games to come out of it. Looking ahead to the Major League Baseball draft this summer, what impact, what losses are you anticipating from that for this team?
Well, as far as the draft goes, Nate, I think I mean, Mason McConaughey is probably where you start. And again, he only made 3 starts this year, but you can bet that scouts saw what he did a year ago. They saw what he did in the fall even. And I think the approach that a lot of pro teams take with someone in his situation is, hey, maybe we can get this guy at a discounted rate in terms of where we draft him and how much we can sign him for. So Mason will have a decision to make based on where he gets drafted about whether he wants to take that next step as a professional or come back. He obviously would be able to come back anyway. He was a junior, but he'd have a medical red shirt. And so he has options. Beyond that in the draft, I don't know that there's anybody super obvious this year that they're going to have to worry about. I think to me, the more interesting personnel decisions are going to come from those seniors who are former junior college players who last winter you just thought they were done because this was their last year. And now suddenly guys like Riley Silva have a decision to make. He could come back because he came from the JUCO ranks. Joshua Overbeek could come back. Ty Stone could come back. So these are guys who suddenly are given that extra year of eligibility, somewhat similar to the COVID years that we kind of worked through a few years ago. And then obviously there's going to be a roster crunch too. I mean, it looks like college baseball is going to go down to 34-man rosters. They're at 40 this year. So, I mean, you just think about some of these seniors maybe that could come back that Nebraska wasn't anticipating. You already have a roster crunch. You have a pretty big incoming recruiting class. It sets up a lot of individual decisions to be made by coaches, to be made through evaluations in the fall. And that's just kind of where they are right now. So the draft will, I think, have a little bit to do with it, but more of it's going to be on some of those individual decisions, kind of like Gabe Swanson and Drew Christo made a year ago about whether guys feel like they can come back and improve their stock next season.
Yeah. Both with the junior college thing and the roster crunch thing. Thanks to the courts. Both of those, and one of them still pending, by the way. But we'll get you out of here on this, Evan, with the matchup today against Holy Cross, and then potentially seeing Oklahoma again or North Carolina, and maybe multiple times. They are set up well pitching wise. They only use Drew Christo just for that one batter at the very end with the bases loaded in the 8th. And Jackson Brockett had the start, so you obviously won't see him. But they didn't use a lot of their big guns. You didn't see Luke Broderick. They have Tyson. They have Tucker Timmerman, and Ty Horn both available as well. So from a pitching aspect, they should be pretty well set. We saw Butenbach and Bolin both play. Didn't see Overbeek. I don't know if you know his availability, but they've got most of their bullets left in their chamber if they need them, right?
Yeah, from a pitching standpoint, they should be in shape. They're going to start Ty Horn this morning here. Like you mentioned, Luke Broderick's going to be a factor. Will Walsh has come out of the bullpen as a long reliever. He's somebody else. Timmerman. And so you're kind of in the spot where you were a week ago in the Big Ten, where like you want to manage your pitching, but you also know that if you lose, then what are you saving them for in the first place? So that's kind of the dance they're going to have to do today and potentially tomorrow if they get a rematch with Oklahoma or North Carolina. They're from a lineup perspective, there's kind of some attrition going on. Joshua Overbeek, Will Bolt said yesterday, out for the rest of the year. That ankle turn ended up being a fracture. Robbie Bolin pinch hit late, but he's clearly limited by the hamstring. We still haven't seen Ty Stone. I guess he had some swelling in his wrist still last week from that hit by pitch a few weeks ago. So, they're kind of patching it together at this point offensively. And there's some quality guys in the lineup for sure. They just don't have the depth there that they're used to having with 3 of their regulars on the shelf right now. But, I think kind of the formula is going to be the same. Like it's going to be critical that you start ahead. That's been when Nebraska starts ahead. I mean, in college baseball, that's good anyway, but for Nebraska, it feels like that's even more important to work from ahead and be able to play pitching matchups and be aggressive offensively. They're going up against the Patriot League pitcher of the year today. So Holy Cross has a pretty good 1-2 punch for a regional 4 seed. But yeah, I mean, this is a game where all hands are on deck pretty much. And, you need a good offensive showing and you need your bullpen to show up if you're going to play into Sunday.
Yeah. Well, anytime there's runners on, we can count on you to drive them in. Evan Bland, Omaha World Herald. Good stuff as always. We appreciate you coming on today, and we will be continuing to read your coverage of Husker baseball as they hopefully don't wrap up the season this weekend. Thanks a lot, Evan.
Yep. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Yep.
All right, Evan Bland, good stuff with him, and yeah, Nate, that's the key, I think, for me for this weekend if they're going to keep moving on. They were 0 for 9, Nebraska was yesterday with 2 outs, and 1 for 15 with runners on base. The only hit was the 3-run triple from Max Butenbach. They got to do better.
Yeah, I mean, they started out 0 for 13, and that becomes a thing in a dugout and among hitters where they're going, oh, geez, we've had all these chances and we haven't taken advantage of them. So early offensive success with clutch situations, I think builds that momentum that can take you through an elimination bracket run.
Yeah. Yeah, we shall see. You got pregame coverage right here on KLIN starting at 10:30. That first pitch against Holy Cross is 11 a.m. Ty Horn, as you heard Evan mention, is getting the ball coming off of his amazing 8-inning gem in the Big Ten championship game against UCLA. So we'll see if Ty Horn can get Nebraska through to tomorrow. All right, we're going to move on to another topic when we get back. What is going on with the college football playoff? I've got thoughts. We'll talk about that and more when we come back here on the KLIN Husker Hour.
For over 80 years.
With current and former Huskers and those that cover the Big Red. This is the KLIN Husker Hour on Lincoln's Husker Radio, 1499.3 KLIN.
Big thanks to Evan Bland of the Omaha World Herald. If you missed him, make sure you are subscribed to the podcast feed for KLIN Husker Hour, wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Music. And if you're already not, you can get us on the video live right now on all the KLIN socials, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, as well as the KLIN Husker Hour Facebook page. Nate, I just need to clear out just for a minute. All right, just leave the ball at the top. I'm going to run with this. So right now, the college football playoff future for beyond this season is completely up in the air, and you've got different bids coming in, and they've kind of settled on 2. There's one that gives you 5 automatic bids from the top 4 leagues plus 1 group of 5, and then 7 or 9 or however the crap many teams they end up having in this thing. It's currently at 12. So it's 5 plus 7 essentially. And the other idea that is being pushed by the Big Ten and the SEC is that the Big Ten and the SEC should have 4 automatic bids each, and then 2 each from the SEC and the Big 12. And then 1 from the group of 5 conferences, whichever higher ranked. And that's, I think, 1 more for an automatic or for an at-large team, or 3 if you go to 16, or 14, or 5 if you go to 16. And it's funny to me that you have the SEC and the Big Ten pushing this, and obviously it's in their interest to do it. They want guaranteed spots. They want to know how many teams are getting in every year. They want to have that money allocated in their budgets automatically, and they want it easy because they feel, hey, you know what? We've put in all this work. We're the prestigious teams. we should be able to sit on our laurels and have what we want, no matter what the other teams do that given season. And I think that it is fundamentally un-American to do such a thing. More teams should have to qualify on their merits that season. I mean, think about Nebraska in the 90s. Could you have ever imagined that they'd miss a bowl game 7 straight years in the next 20, 25 years? No, you would never think that. We shouldn't be locking in this many automatic bids because it locks certain teams into that upper crust where it inherently locks other programs out forever, potentially. If you do something like this, it will upset the upsets. You lose some of the charm of the Boise State or the Tulane getting into the group, the New Year's Six game. International soccer had this same thing happen almost. It was the Super League where the top 15 teams in all of Europe tried to essentially lock themselves into a new tournament forever. Like, oh yeah, we're the best 15 teams, so we're always going to be qualified automatically. And you know who revolted against that, Nate? The fans of their own teams. Their own fans revolted against them at their own stadiums, and they backed down. Big Ten fans, SEC fans should not want this. Alabama fans should not want this. As mad as they are that they didn't qualify last year because they sucked against Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, I'm sorry. Beat Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. Stop telling me how difficult your SEC schedule is. Have a better team. Win your games. You should have to qualify that season. If Nebraska was able to coast through the 2010s and 2020s on their accolades from the 80s and 90s, would that have made for a better experience for Nebraska fans? Maybe. They'd be in the playoff. But would they have deserved it? No. Make them earn it every single year. If you have more than one auto bid for a conference, it's un-American.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. I also think that it goes against the every business impulse that these athletic directors have anymore.
Yeah.
Because they want to be able to sit there and say, we've got 4 teams at least in the playoffs. So we can start working down the ticket of SEC games, of Big Ten games, and saying, hey, not only is Michigan, Ohio State really important, but now Nebraska, Michigan's really important because that could be a playoff spot on the line there, farther down, which adds value to the television package. The whole discussion for me is part of the pain of taking college football from sport to business. And not to say that this pendulum hasn't already been swinging, but, you talked about charm, and charm is 130 some teams thinking that they're on the same level. Look, realistically, Mountain West teams, MAC teams, Sun Belt Conference teams, on down the list, they are not competing fundamentally at the same level at which the Big Ten, the SEC, and the ACC and the Big 12 are. But what I hear you saying, and what I agree with, is just because they aren't right now doesn't mean the door should be locked on them forever.
Yeah.
And that's the part that kind of bugs me, is that, if things go right, if things swing one way or another demographically, if, things change, it solidifies certain teams in one place and it leaves other teams, programs, markets in the other. I don't necessarily blame the Big Ten and the SEC for trying to solidify these things, but this is where the lack of a college football commissioner and a strong central voice in something like this is really notable, because he'd be the one to say, hey, it helps your self-interest if we set this up. It hurts the sport. There's nobody there to say it, so it's not getting said.
Yeah, we'll see where this thing ends up, but I had to get that off my chest, and I'm sure a lot of you out there agree. We've got to get to a break and wrap this thing up. We've got about 70 people on the live stream for video. Appreciate that. We're gonna wrap this thing up right when we get back here on the KLIN Husker Hour.
You're listening to the KLIN Husker Hour. Executive Travel Talk is next on 1499.3 KLIN. Everything Huskers is right here. You're listening to the KLIN Husker Hour on Lincoln's Husker Radio, 1499.3 KLIN.
Well, Nate, we found out Nebraska's going to be playing a Friday night game at Minnesota this football season. It's going to be on the heels of a trip out to Maryland. Not exactly the best setup you want coming from the East Coast to play right away, but it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, just got to deal with it. I'm sure they're going to be well prepared for it. But a tight turnaround. You hope that it's an 11 a.m. kick out at Maryland. Just get you a couple extra hours.
Yeah, let's start talking to the Big Ten now. Like, hey, let's get this wrapped up. All right.
Yeah.
Really good stuff all year for softball, Nate. Really appreciate your calls. Great work as always. And now we get to call Jack at Storm Chasers games. So that's good.
Yeah, how about that? Jack Caglione. He almost hit one out the game I saw Thursday.
Yeah. All right. Thanks to Evan. Thanks to Nate. Thanks to Kenny Larrabee. I'm Cole. Go Big Red.